everybody. Today we're going to talk about setting up a leopard gecko habitat. So we're going to talk to you about everything you need for in your habitat and then show you a couple of our leopard geckos. This is a standard 10-gallon tank. This is what you would start with for a hatchling. Of course, if you wanted to go with something bigger, you could always go bigger. Bigger is better, but this is the minimum size that we would start with, which is a 10-gallon, and again, that's good for just one hatchling leopard gecko. First thing you want to have on the bottom is some type of substrate. Now we're going to use some of our carpet. This makes it easy so that when you have your hatchling gecko, there's no chance of them ingesting any of the substrate if you happen to want to feed them while they're in the enclosure. What we do in our reptile room is we have substrate in the enclosures, and anytime that we feed them, we take them out of the enclosure, feed them in something like you see here. There's a couple reasons for that. When they're hatchlings, we can get away with putting a couple in a tank. Only when they're hatchlings. As they mature, you're not going to get away with that. They can get territorial and they could start to fight. But as hatchlings, we might have 3 in a tank, a little bit bigger than this, and we take them out. We make sure we put them in an enclosure. We watch that each one of them gets to eat and that they're not ingesting anything because there's nothing on the bottom of the habitat that we can feed them in. But we're going to use our carpet. Okay, also on the bottom we're going to need to have a water dish. You want something shallow. They don't swim very well. There is a chance that they'll blow themselves up with air and float a little bit, but they're not swimmers. So you want to make sure that the dish that you select is going to be a shallow dish, something very easy for them to get in and out of. They need some place to hide. We always want to have 2 hides. We're going to talk about the heat a little bit later. We're going to have a heated side and a cooler side of the tank. You always want to have 2 hiding spaces, one on the heated side, one on the cooler side. That way the leopard gecko is not giving up the heat that it needs or the coolness that it needs because it wants to hide. So you always give them 2 choices. This we're going to use, we're going to have this on our heated side. It's just a regular old half of a log. This serves as a hiding place, also serves for them to get up on top of if they need to get a little closer to the heat. They're not going to be climbers. They have little tiny toenails, so they're limited to only being on the ground. So they're not going to climb up the glass like some of the other geckos that we have. Most of the time you're going to see these guys on the ground, although if you do make some ledges, they'll use those and they'll climb up a little bit, but they're not going to hang out on top of the tree for you. So we're going to use that on a heated side. When a leopard gecko needs to shed, it needs some humidity. So we're going to pick out our second hide is going to be one of our wet caves. And we're going to take some of our reindeer moss, put this in some water, soak it a little bit, put it inside of the hide. The humidity inside that hide will help the leopard geckos when they go to shed their skin. It won't get stuck on them. Sometimes with smaller geckos like these guys, the shedding will actually get very dry and it'll stick on their toes, constrict their toes, and they can end up losing their toes. You don't want that to happen. When a leopard gecko sheds, they're normally going to turn around and eat it. So you might look at your gecko one day and it'll look like somebody dumped baby powder on it. It'll look all white. And then you look in and it's perfectly fine. It doesn't look white anymore, but you don't see any shedding, and that is because they generally will eat it. It's lots of vitamins and minerals, and it's a good way for them to cover up their tracks so that predators do not know that they're around if they eat the shedding instead of leaving it behind. So we're going to take our wet hide and we're going to put this over here. You can moisten the whole hide if you would like, and that will keep it nice and humid, but you also want to take that moss, moisten the moss a little bit, and just leave enough space so your gecko can still get in there and hide. Okay? All right. Then we're going to put one of our skulls in here. This just adds like enrichment. You've probably heard about enrichment a lot when zoos talk about their animals. It's important for any animal to have something that's new and exciting, not just a boring 10-gallon tank with a piece of carpet on the bottom. That's not sufficient for them. They need to have something that's exciting, something for them to explore. So we're going to add a little dinosaur hide, and what you want to do is, every so often get a new hide and replace, switch things out, make it a little more exciting for them. That's called enrichment. Okay? Then we're going to need some heat for on top. We're going to have our heated side over here, so we're going to use one of our domes, and we are going to use our daylight bulb. And this is our daylight bulb. It's blue in color, but it's going to throw off a white light. You would put that into your fixture, and that's going to stay on one side of your habitat, and that's where your heat's going to be. Now, on your heated side, leopard geckos should be about 85 to 88 degrees on the heated side. Cooler side should be down in the 70s. And over here you want to have it about 85, 88 degrees. How do you determine that? We use one of our thermometers. You want to put your thermometer where your animal spends its time. We already talked that leopard geckos are not very good at climbing, so you're not going to want your thermometer to be reading the air temperature up here. You're going to want your thermometer to be down a little bit further where the gecko would be. That's where you want to determine if you've got the heat correct. You should see your gecko thermoregulate. You should not see your gecko sitting underneath the heat light all day long. They should be sitting under the heat light, getting a little bit warm, and then moving on to the other side of the tank. Now these guys are more active at dawn and dusk, but that doesn't mean they never come out during the day. So you should see a little bit of activity from them early in the morning and later in the evening. And again, you should see them going back and forth. If your gecko is hanging out constantly underneath this heat light, it probably means that your heated side is not warm enough. Heat allows the body to build up enzymes, break down the food, builds up their immune system, also allows them basically to function normally. So when we take a look at this gecko, if he's in the proper temperature, he will be able to move, his little legs will move, he'll be able to climb, he'll look alert, he'll be sticking his tongue out, he'll be interested in his environment. If he was being too cold, then he would be sluggish, he wouldn't move around very well, and a lot of times you'll see them try and strike at food and completely miss, and that's because the temperature also affects their eyesight. If they're not warm enough, they can't very well see, so they strike at food, they try and grab it, and nothing happens because their eyesight is not functioning properly. So this little guy is just a regular, what we call a regular leopard gecko. We have hundreds of different morphs. That's because leopard geckos have been so many years that with captive breeding you come out with all these different colors, all these different patterns. They're all still the same care, basic leopard gecko care, but they look quite different. This one here is called a Reptile leopard gecko. And again, we have one leopard gecko per habitat. When they're hatchlings like this, you might get away with putting 2 or more, but you know, in this size tank, you will really only want 1. We're just showing you this guy to show you a different color morph. You'll notice that when you take a look at the geckos, they have very fat tails. That's a healthy gecko. That's a sign of a healthy gecko that's storing fat in his tail. If he starts to get very thin, there's prominent bones sticking out, that means he's not utilizing the vitamins and minerals from his food for whatever reason. Either he's not getting fed enough, not fed the right variety of food, or he doesn't have the heat to produce the enzymes to break the food down. So you want to take a look for some very fat tails on your leopard gecko. They do stick out their tongue. They use their tongue to clean their eyeballs, but they do have eyelids. They can also close their eyes. Now, your cooler side of the tank, you want to have a lower wattage bulb. So if we had a 60 watt on this side, we're going to want a 40 watt on the other side, and we're going to use a nighttime bulb because this is going to become our heat source for at night. At nighttime, the temperature generally drops. So if you have a 60 watt day bulb, you probably don't want a 60 watt night bulb because then the temperature is going to be the same 24 hours a day. So if you had a 60 watt day and your temperatures were reading properly, you want a 40 watt night, that way the temperature drops a little bit. So this bulb, you might just need the daytime bulb on during the day. That may be sufficient in a 10-gallon tank. And then at nighttime, you have your nighttime bulb in the other fixture. You switch the nighttime bulb on for nighttime heat. Another important thing that the geckos need is fluorescent light. Years ago, people thought, well, you know, they don't come out much during the day, so I guess they don't need sunlight. Not true. They still can develop metabolic bone disease, so we do recommend that you use a UVB bulb. This one is a fluorescent tube bulb, a compact fluorescent bulb. It gives off rays like the sunlight. You need to have this bulb on during the day. So when your daytime heat bulb's on, your fluorescent light is on. At nighttime, you turn your day off and you turn this off because you don't want to have bright light on your gecko 24 hours a day. This allows them to utilize vitamins and minerals from their food and also prevents metabolic bone disease. Okay, something else that we didn't talk about when we put water in the tank is you don't want to just use straight tap water. You always want to take the chlorine out. So we have a little bottle of Reptisafe. It takes the chlorine out of the water. We use this something similar for fish tanks, but what's special about the Reptisafe is it also adds electrolytes, which are very good for the reptiles. So that's another reason that we use Reptisafe as opposed to something that would be used for our fish. If you have any questions for us, be sure to reach out to us on Facebook, and we'll be sure to help you with anything that you need. Thank you.